Hello, everyone. Welcome to FEM 2020. FEM 2020 is a series of conversations on various topics on women's health, where we are trying to explore the intersections with society, with the psychology of several aspects of women's health. So, diabetes in pregnancy is one of the very important topics when we talk about society in general and women's health in particular, because this is one of the way in which we can actually deal with future generation diabetes epidemic. So more and more we understand that there is a concept of fetal programming of diseases, and it's an uh, important reason for the growing and expanding epidemic of obesity and diabetes, especially in countries like India. So today we have a panel of eminent speakers who will be discussing this topic from various perspectives. So I'll invite Dr. Gagan Priya to moderate this session. She is an endocrinologist, a very accomplished endocrinologist who has won many awards, and she's a senior consultant endocrinologist at Fortis Hospital and Ivy Hospital, Mohali. She's a strong advocate of women in academics, founding member of FLAME, which is Forum of Ladies in Medicine, and has a keen academic interest as a speaker, medical writer, and opinion leader. She is co-editor of many different interesting books like lipocrinology, glucocrinology, and hypothyroid disorders, and a section editor of Endocrinology of Urja, The Power of Her. So she has over 50 publications in international and national journals and many different chapters. Passions include literature, writing poetry, and dance. So welcome, Dr. Gagan. So you can take over from
Yeah,
here.
thank you, Veena. I would say this is a wonderful initiative, and I'm so happy to be surrounded by such wonderful, dynamic women around me. So, we have a very interesting panel of specialists among us. Dr. Anita Sabharwal, she is a gynecologist practicing in Delhi currently, and she is also the secretary of the Forum of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of South Delhi. She is an active academician who's been round the clock organizing many meetings. She is the co-coordinator for Adolescent Health Committee of AOGD, the chairperson for Adolescent Health Committee AOGD between 2010 to 12. She is also an executive for AOGD from 2016 to 17. And at present, she is the chairperson for Public Health Awareness Committee of ISCCP. So with that very active background, I think she's one of the wonderful people to guide us through the current topic. And she's currently practicing in South Delhi for the last over 3 decades. And it's really a pleasure to have you here, ma'am. And the next panelist is Dr. Sagarika Mukherjee. She is born and brought up in Kolkata. She did her MBBS from Kolkata and MRCP from UK, FRCP from Ireland. And she also has a CCST, Endocrinology and Internal Medicine from UK. She is a private practitioner, endocrinologist, and also a visiting faculty at Columbia Asia. She has been an active teacher for the PHFI courses for diabetes, and she has also been teaching MRCP aspirants of late and recruiting more and more endocrinologists, I believe, to our spectrum. She's delivered many lectures in our national as well as international conferences. And more recently, she's also delving into medical law and ethics from the Bangalore University. So that's another beautiful spectrum. And her hobbies include traveling and music. And our third panelist is Dr. Meena Chhabra, another accomplished lady who just got to know in the last month or so. And she has over 25 years of clinical practice experience in the field of diabetes. She's passionate about treating diabetic patients in low resource settings. So that's one area I think Meena can give us a lot of inputs with regard to pregnancy and diabetes. She herself has adopted 50 patients of type 1 diabetes and their families for providing support to them. She loves teaching and spreading awareness, especially among people from rural background, not only in her clinic, but also she goes out into society for those purposes. And empathy is one of her key features. So welcome to such wonderful panelists. So first question I'll just put for Dr. Sagrika. So Dr. Sagrika, we are seeing more and more women coming with type 1 or type 2 diabetes who conceive and they come to us for consultation. And there's a fear among these women when planning pregnancy or even before marriage. Can they conceive? Can they have safe pregnancies and healthy babies? So what is your opinion or your advice to these women?
Okay. As our awareness of diabetes is improving, there is more and more consciousness about diabetes. So there are more women getting diagnosed with diabetes, and also because of the changing dynamics of the society, changing genetics, as you were saying that that our prenatal genes and all these things having an impact. More and more women at quite a young age getting diagnosed with diabetes. As we all know that type 1 diabetes get diagnosed obviously at a very young age, but even young women are also being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I must say at this outset that being diagnosed with diabetes is not a hindrance at all in becoming pregnant. But you have to become a bit savvy about it. You must become a bit aware about it. So if a person is already diagnosed with diabetes, be it type 1 or be it type 2 diabetes, first and foremost thing is most important is to establish a good glycemic control before you become pregnant. So whether it is type 1 or not, or whether it is type 2, you must have a good glycemic control with your HbA1c targeting less than 6.5% and with medications. And once you are ready, once your glycemic status is optimum, then you have to choose medications which will be more compatible with pregnancy. Now, women who are not diagnosed with diabetes, sometimes you can also get diabetes diagnosed during pregnancy. There is one more thing called gestational diabetes. There are women who are more prone to get gestational diabetes, like women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome before becoming pregnant, starting in their teenagers, women who are a bit obese, women who are becoming pregnant at quite a matured age or has got a very strong family history of diabetes. They must be really aware that they must have a blood test, not just in the beginning of second trimester, but at least on the first trimester, or if not at the booking test of their pregnancy, to do a blood sugar test and find out that what their sugar status is like. And what I tend to advise is that every time your gynecologist or whoever doctor is looking after you is asking for a blood test, just do a random blood sugar, so that the blood sugar point, the diabetes, is really not missed and that doesn't mess your pregnancy at all. Yes. And when you're choosing medications, you have to be a bit aware about what medications is suitable for the pregnancy, which medications are suitable for the baby, and it really won't harm your baby. At the same time, will maintain an adequate control of diabetes.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. The crux of what you've said so far is planning ahead. So the concept of planned parenthood. We need to tell our ladies who already have pre-existing diabetes that they must consult the healthcare provider, and optimization of care is important before Absolutely. We go into pregnancy.
Absolutely.
So let's say, there is a person who's come for counseling. So what kind of evaluation would you do? One, of course, glycemic control, but would you also look for any complications this lady might have before pregnancy?
Sure. Because diabetes can sometimes be associated with complications. So definitely monitor their blood pressure to see that they don't have any pre-existing blood pressure problems. See that whether there is any at all, any heart disease or not, or if they had uncontrolled diabetes for a prolonged period of time, look for other microvascular problems like their retina, look at their kidneys, what is their albumin content in the urine, etc. You should be really worrying about all these things.
Yeah, and I think we can also add a thyroid panel to.
Absolutely, we have to add a thyroid panel, because having an optimum TSH is also a mandatory thing to have a good baby.
True, that's right. And you were mentioning about medications that require to be changed. Can you throw some light on which medications we need to stop before pregnancy?
if you are on medications, say for example, for type 1, if you are on type 1 diabetes, you are on insulin. So that really doesn't require any change of your medication, because your insulin dosage will be adjusted throughout pregnancy depending on your blood sugar reports. And also you will be need to doing frequent blood sugar monitoring, as your healthcare advisor will tell you. For type 2 diabetes, if your control is not optimum prior to pregnancy, it is utmost important that you must establish a proper control before becoming pregnant. So therefore, in order to establish control, you need to have certain medications which will sensitize your own body towards insulin. Say you can have metformin, you can have a DPP-4 inhibitor, or a group of medicines called SGLT2 inhibitor alongside with insulin. Once your control is optimized, then these medicines, particularly DPP-4 inhibitor, sulfonylureas, and SGLT2 inhibitor, must be stopped, and you should only remain on insulin plus minus metformin to carry you throughout pregnancy, because the other medications are really harmful for the baby.
True. And I think we can also add to this list any cholesterol lowering drugs,
any cholesterol,
or blood pressure lowering drugs like ACE inhibitors.
Certain medications for blood pressure which is permitted in pregnancy, but most of the blood pressure medications are really not permitted in pregnancy.
Right. Thank you so much. Dr. Anita, with your experience, we have often seen women now who have not really told us about, that they're planning pregnancy, and they already have diabetes, sometimes suboptimally controlled, and now they come to us with pregnancy. So what is your advice? There's a lot of fear among them, and we are also scared about what advice to give. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gagan Priya. I think very clearly Dr. Sagrika has already mentioned that this blood sugar has to be very well controlled. The glycemic index has to be controlled very well. And if the patient has not had a good control, and now with that kind of diabetes, she is coming to us with a pregnancy, so we can imagine that we could be having a lot of problems. We could be having a lot of adverse outcomes, both for the mother as well as for the fetus. But at the same time, since we have a lot of good things, we have the people like you, the diabetes specialists, and also good obstetricians. If all of them are together and this lady is made aware, she's educated, informed, and counseled all about this, that if immediately she has to have a good glycemic control, she has to have a good control of her diabetes, and once this control is there, and then many of her risk things can be modified, and she may have a good pregnancy, because even these days we have very good advanced ultrasound technology, and with that we are able to pick up lots of congenital defects, because that is the main issue which this patient must be worried of, because the sugar in the early part of the pregnancy is teratogenic. So, but even if it does cause, or if it doesn't, we are able to pick it up by 18 weeks to 20 weeks. And that is the time, if at all, if it requires to be terminated, it could be done. And I think 99% times it need not be terminated, because it's not required. So this is what I'll say, that she doesn't have to worry. Immediately start action. Be under good under your good doctors, and let them treat you, and let them make your sugar come under control, and then you can go ahead. But then this has to be a shared decision, because she has to be aware of all the bad effects also, if they may happen. So she's the one who has to decide with the help of doctors of this.
So I think patient empowerment and shared decision making in this scenario is what we look at. That's great.
Right.
So Dr. Sagrika had also thrown light on something called gestational diabetes. Now, during pregnancy, a lot of hormonal changes occur in the body. There's a dynamic. There's an early anabolic phase when the woman is storing all the nutrients, and in the later phase, there's a rise in insulin resistance, and a catabolic phase occurs where the glucose production also increases, and the insulin resistance actually is very high. So what do you think causes gestational diabetes, and which women are at risk of gestational diabetes?
Muted, Dr. Sagrika. You are muted. You are muted, Dr. Sagrika.
Hello, am I audible now? Okay.
Yes, Dr. Sagrika. Yes, please.
Okay, as Gagan has mentioned that initially there is an anabolic stage and then later on a catabolic stage, and there are a lot of hormonal changes, and all these hormonal changes in the pregnancy is really to protect the body or to prepare the body for another new thing which is developing inside the body. So all these all these hormones prepare your body for the stress that you're going to go through, and these hormones really push your blood sugar up. So in the susceptible women who has got some amount of genetic susceptibility, it just tips over the balance and the blood sugar level goes up. And these blood sugar level during pregnancy, it starts during pregnancy and ends at the after delivery, and that is called your gestational diabetes. But sometimes what we tend to see is that even a type 2 diabetes can start as gestational diabetes and get carried on even after delivery. Gestational diabetes really should be managed like any other diabetes state. That is, the optimum thing is you have to maintain a good blood sugar control by whatever means. Whatever means only insulin is allowed in pregnancy, and of course your dietary restriction, keeping in mind that you have got a growing baby inside you and you have to provide nutrition to the baby as well. But at the same time, the mother's blood sugar should be kept under tight control. When you mention about insulin resistance, a lot of people also tend to use metformin, particularly women who have had polycystic ovarian syndrome and they are very prone to develop gestational diabetes, and they are advised to continue metformin, particularly in the first trimester of pregnancy, to take care of the insulin resistance, and so that insulin initiation can be delayed and they can be managed with diet and metformin alone. We also see that women who has got a very strong family history of diabetes, they have a tendency to gestational diabetes, or women who are becoming pregnant at a mature age, say mid-30s or so, they have got an increased tendency of getting gestational diabetes, and also who are quite obese or have had a big baby in the past, they have got increased chances of getting gestational diabetes.
Yeah, so I think that so a large majority of the patients that we are seeing now have these risk factors, and identifying them would help. Dr. Anita, Dr. Sagrika mentioned about screening for gestational diabetes. So first, of course, she said that as soon as a woman conceives, we need to have screening for pre-existing diabetes. But
Yes.
How do we screen for gestational diabetes? At what level do we consider doing testing for that?
See, as she mentioned that firstly, the moment patient comes for first antenatal visit, as you also said, we must do a blood sugar test to assess the pre-existing diabetes. And after that, around 24 weeks, we must do a second test. Between 24 to 28 weeks, the second test must be done, with which we are able to detect her diabetes. Because if that time she has, then we'll say she has gestational diabetes mellitus.
Right. So I
And
think
we
it
are
is
doing
that
universal screening in India, especially we are following the DIPSI guidelines, because as she just mentioned, Indian women are really much prone to this gestational diabetes, and it's almost tenfold. So they say we must do universal screening for all these patients, all the women who are pregnant. And except for, I think, NICE guidelines, all other guidelines suggest universal screening of these women.
Yes.
Only NICE guidelines, they mention that, as she just mentioned, the risk factors. So only those women who are having the risk factors, they advise screening for those women.
Yes.
Also, with DIPSI, got a very convenient test as well. Like
Yes.
now going through the proper oral glucose tolerance test, which sometimes can be very inconvenient for the lady, especially who are traveling from quite remote areas. DIPSI advises just do a one-time test after a post-meal, and if your blood sugar is within that range of definition of gestational diabetes, then you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And it really doesn't involve a lot of cumbersome procedure as well, and it's very simple to follow.
True.
Yeah,
I think that's a
very
good
right.
point.
Very right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
think
Dr. Meena, I would like to just extend this conversation further to the pandemic situation. We were talking about gestational diabetes as the gold standard for picking up, OGTT as the gold standard for picking up GDM. But in our current pandemic situation, going to the lab, sitting there for 2 to 3 hours getting an OGTT might put a woman at risk of acquiring infection. So several countries have come up with guidelines. I've seen Australia giving a guideline, Canada has given it, even the FOXI statement has come in. What is your take on this alternative screening strategy using, let's say, a fasting plasma glucose or HbA1c for GDM? Okay.
Good evening. Okay, first I like to start with a very interesting 8 lines that I've written in my clinic. Sorry for joining you guys late. And this line is for every girl who walks into my clinic. And I would like to read this. I am planning a pregnancy, but I am overweight. My mom and dad are diabetic. Should I go ahead or wait? So this is written in my clinic. And then I have written, what did the doctor say? That's what I'm saying. Wait, said the doctor. Get your blood sugar done. We treat you if you're diabetic, and the battle is won. So I'm talking about even pre-primary prevention. So what I do is we address the adolescent girls. And why we are doing it? Because they're coming with their parents. Both parents are diabetic. And it's very important to let them know that checking is important. Now, as far as DIPSI guidelines are concerned, we do have issues with them. I agree that in the rural setup or in a community setup, Gagan, DIPSI is important, but the sensitivity of DIPSI is low. You may miss some of the fasting blood sugars. I agree where women travel a lot of distance. And in India, it's a myth that a pregnant woman should not remain hungry for a long time. We have. But in a place like Delhi and in a tertiary center, and when you're checking individuals, I think I like to stick to the IADPSG guidelines. Will you agree, Gagan, that we should stick to the guidelines there? And we do a 75-gram OGTT. Now, DIPSI, of course, is good. You don't have phlebotomist available in the rural areas. Glucometers can be used, but you and me know that glucometers are not calibrated. There is inter-individual difference. Some of the glucometers show a lot of variation. So we may falsely label somebody as a GDM. But notwithstanding that, we are now using glucometers, but I would not like to use that to label somebody as GDM. Even in the COVID era, I think I would be happier if the patient does a fasting glucose, goes back home, and we give her the 75 grams and she comes back. So I would not like to label somebody, because the implications of labeling somebody as gestational diabetes is a lifelong implication. We know diabetes begets diabetes. We have to screen her after 4 to 6 weeks, and then 50% of our GDMs will become diabetic 5 years after the index pregnancy, and 3 times greater risk in about 16 years. And we know that. So I think I would not, even in spite of the COVID era, I would like her to be well protected, or call somebody home for the test, which is possible in our, regarding the rural areas, I think I'll stick to DIPSI, because doing a test is better than not doing anything. So I think we conclude that in the rural setting and in a community setting, DIPSI guidelines are good. But in individual patients, I think I'll stick to IADPSG, and we would like to go ahead with a 75-gram oral glucose tolerance test. And I like to, so this has helped, Dr. Gagan, because it's written there. You're planning a pregnancy and you are overweight, get the sugar done. So it's, it's been instilled in them that yes, the blood sugar is important. And I'll tell you, there have been a lot of incidents, both the gynecologist will agree, that the patient goes to them and she is diabetic in the first visit. And she says, she, feigns ignorance and says, this is the first time I've been diagnosed as diabetic. And the gynecologist, wishes to believe her. But I've had patients who've been diabetic for 5-6 years, because now with the rising epidemic of obesity, we see more and more diabetics in the adolescent girls with PCOS and obesity. These girls, when they get married, they hide type 2 diabetes. They sometimes are on oral drugs like metformin. They may not be on drugs and maybe just continuing with a little bit of diet modification. And when they get pregnant, that's the first time that they declare that they are diabetic. So vascular, they may already have complications because they've been diabetic for a while. So I think that is very important, identifying the pre-gestation diabetes. So there are 2 types there. Described as only overt diabetes, which is diagnosed in the first trimester, and gestational diabetes, which our learned colleague said is diagnosed close to the 28 weeks, but we should repeat one test at 32 weeks, and universal screening for all Asian patients, particularly Indians. But I see a third category who's already been diabetic for 5 to 7 years sometimes, hides that she's type 2 diabetic, and walks into the gynecologist chamber in the first antenatal visit and says she doesn't know she's diabetic. There comes the importance of the gynecologist, that she should be doing a urine albumin creatinine ratio, she should be seeing the fundus, to look aggressively for microvascular complications in that patient, because now marriages are being delayed. So if girls are getting married late, diabetes is happening earlier in the adolescent age groups, with particularly if there's a very strong biparental family history of obesity and type 2 diabetes. I think our gynecologist colleagues should be aware that this may not be just a predated undiagnosed diabetes, it could be a predated diagnosed uncontrolled diabetes. That's important.
I think that's very important, and we also need to understand as a society, a lot of stigma is attached to the diagnosis of diabetes, and women often tend to hide it from their partners before marriage. So what we've heard so far from our panelists is that optimized control can give them good outcomes, a healthy pregnancy, a healthy mother, and a healthy baby. So if we can, hammer in to our people that this is the way forward, we should be able to remove the stigma attached with the diagnosis of diabetes in women. That's a very, very important thing. Coming to Dr. Meena again, let's say we have now a lady diagnosed with gestational diabetes. She's 28 weeks. How would you manage this lady?
That's important. So I think a very 1 week or a 2 week trial of a medical nutrition therapy, we should actually give her the values that I categorically write on a piece of paper, that I want your fasting 1 hour and 2 hour. I want fasting to be less than 95, 1 hour to be less than 140 milligram per cent, and 2 hours to be less than 120. Try that with diet, and our dietitian helps. We go down on the carbs in an individual meal. We space the meals. We give foods with low glycemic index, and at the same time, we give calories that are needed. And then after 1 week, if we have not reached our targets of a fasting less than 95, or 1 hour less than 140, and a 2 hour less than 120, and this is in gestational diabetes, they are ready to prick n number of times. Sometimes they are PCOS pregnancies, they are very precious pregnancies, and they're ready to do it. And we also tell them that this is your chance to have a healthy baby if you check your sugars. So they do it very often. And then in 1 week, if medical nutrition therapy fails, then I would like to put them on insulin. So we usually start with analog insulins or regular insulins 3 times just before meals. And she continues to monitor 1 hour and 2 hour. Usually we don't need basal insulin in these patients, but sometimes, of course, people who are type 2s and have become pregnant, they may need basal bolus. But the GDMs may not need basal because fastings are usually well controlled. So we start with a very low dose of, say, 4 to 6 units of an analog insulin before meals. And we gradually build up the dose, and she keeps calling you. So I think I am in touch with my patient. I'm sure Gagan is, every day, and they call me at least, But Gagan, I have a question for you. Do you do every day, all meals 1 hour, 2 hour, or some 2 hours or some 1 hour? How do you go about it?
It's more of a staggered pattern. I think what I'm usually doing is a fasting and post meals, but they can do, like, for 1 week, they can do the 1 hour value. The next week, they can do the 2 hour value.
I do that.
And we've seen that both the values help. So I'll go to Dr. Sagrika about her opinion on this also. She's got a very good experience with diabetes and pregnancy. So in pharmacological treatment, do you consider oral anti-diabetics in the management protocol? That's another question that comes in, and we don't have clear answers.
Only metformin, otherwise I'm really scared. And
Right.
if you look to the literature, there are studies about using sulfonylurea, particularly glibenclamide, but only in pockets of USA and sub-Saharan Africa. But other than that, there aren't any studies on using sulfonylurea in gestational diabetes or diabetes as such in pregnancy. And insulin is licensed. Of late, we have got analog insulin licensed, but it's usually human insulin which got the license to be used in pregnancy. And of course, you can use metformin, and you can argue with metformin that it doesn't really cross your fetoplacental barrier and also doesn't affect the fetus that much, and also will take care a little bit on the insulin resistant side of it, especially with gestational and type 2 diabetic mothers.
But Gagan, we like to discuss here the MIG-TOFU trial, which showed that people who used metformin during pregnancies, their offsprings had greater weight gain after age, of
Later
that
on.
year.
So about 8 years of age, they showed that the weight gain was more. So I think there are a lot of issues with metformin unresolved. Maybe future studies will show those results. We don't know what happens to metabolic imprinting, but as of now, I think even I prefer insulin as first choice. And we have to understand metformin also is a molecule which is not very effective when it comes to, the pre-existing diabetes.
Yeah.
So all of these women will really need insulin. So Dr. Sagrika, in your protocol, do you use pre-mixed insulins in pregnancy, or do you straight away go for basal bolus insulin regimes?
I prefer, to be honest with you, I prefer basal bolus because that gives you a lot of flexibility, especially during pregnancy with vomiting and all these things, and not having low appetite, a lot of other emotional issues as well. Meal can become a bit of a problem. So if you are on a basal bolus, then you can really have a lot of flexibility, and also the person can have a fixed basal dose and adjust the boluses accordingly. But for convenience sake, we have to sometimes give in and then settle with a premix preparation. And I tend to give human premixes and tend to categorically tell them that you must leave a 20 to 25 minutes gap before your injection, and try and leave it between 12 hours apart. If it is 11 hours and 13 hours, it's best, but at least 12 hours, and don't delay at all. And also very important to advise them that there are 3 main meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner, but you must have snacking in between, and healthy snacking, which will not cause hypoglycemia, at the same time will not unnecessarily put on weight. And there is one more thing which I tell my patients is that eat for one person, don't eat for 2%. Make sure you have adequate amount of protein in your diet and reduce down on your refined carbohydrates, and have plenty of fibers, and that will take you through.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. A lot of people believe that, pregnant women need to eat for 2, and the pregnancy weight gain is about 20-25 kg, and that actually, despite good glycemic control, we end up with macrosomia. Dr. Meena, what is
One question? Can I ask one question?
Yes, Dr.
Yeah,
Anita, please.
it was regarding metformin only, because some patients, they are conceiving on metformin who have PCOS and, otherwise infertility patients. So once they have conceived and they turn out to be diabetic also. So in that case, what do you say? We stop metformin and start her on insulin, or metformin can be continued?
Dr. Meena, would you like to take this?
So
Yes.
I usually, if it's a PCOS pregnancy, the choice is with the gynecologist. But I don't continue beyond the 2nd trimester. But there are studies which say you can. So like Gagan pointed out, lots of controversies, lots of unresolved issues with metformin. Gagan, since this is also going to non-medicals, I would like to describe something very interesting called the Indian phenotype. And I think all of us can add. So there was a very interesting famine in the Dutch famine during the World War. And when this famine happened, the Dutch are basically a very rich population, but the Nazis, they cut off food supply to Netherlands. So when food supply was cut, women who were pregnant got lesser calories, very little calories, because there was starvation. But once they delivered the baby, the World War ended, the Allied forces won, and they started getting food. Now, when they analyzed these babies who were low birth weight when they were born, but they had catch-up growth because they got enough food later, they had higher incidence of obesity compared to their own siblings. They had higher incidence of dyslipidemia, higher incidence of hypertension, type 2 diabetes. Now, this is what is known as the Indian phenotype, something similar. So Gagan, do you believe that we were a starving population, and particularly our rural areas where now there is physical inactivity because transport is available? They also drink Coca-Cola or carbonated drinks.
Yeah.
They don't work half as hard. They have water. They don't have to fill water. So even in our rural areas, there's been a transition. Less physical activity. It's not safe also. We don't have parks even in urban areas which are safe. So because of this transition, children who are born to malnourished mothers in rural areas and are malnourished or low birth weight. They're born to malnourished mothers. Low birth weight they have. When they have catch up growth, that's when they are more prone to develop obesity, type 2 diabetes, and dyslipidemia. So this is the Indian paradox that we have. That and the other thing which is very interesting, and I like to, so this I think will be easily understandable by our general people, not the doctors, that insulin doesn't cross the placenta, but the high sugar does. So if the mother has high sugar, sugar crosses the placenta, there is a message to the fetal pancreas to make more insulin. It's very simple to understand. The fetus responds to the high sugar from the mother via the placenta by making more insulin. So it's kind of using up its pancreatic beta cells. So it's born with the fetus, the neonate is born with a lower beta cell mass. Is that also an explanation? It's also an explanation for why a type 2 diabetic mother begets a type 2 diabetic child. And that is why I think it's the role of the woman in preventing non-communicable diseases. It's very important for the women. We've stopped cooking, most of us. And now that I've started cooking during the lockdown, I realized
Right.
I make much healthier food. You make healthier options as compared to your helps. So I think we have to go back to our traditional way of cooking.
Right.
And we have to stop ordering from Swiggies and the fast food, because dense food is also is responsible for the epidemic of obesity that we are going through. And the second thing is, I think obesity is related to malnutrition, also to large birth weight. So both ways, it's a paradox. Doesn't you like to talk about that? So we have
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, I agree completely with you. We do have data from India also. Professor Yajnik from Pune has done wonderful work on developmental origin of adult disorders.
Yeah.
And he's done this work in newborns, founding that maternal malnutrition and fetal poor nutrition at birth can increase the risk of lifetime disorders, not just diabetes, obesity, but even cardiovascular disease.
Yes.
So we have to, this concept I think is now primordial prevention.
Yes.
Start focusing
There's
on
a term coined called thrifty gene,
thrifty
which is
gene.
very difficult to the Indian subcontinent because we were subjugated to famine and lot of hardships, say about 50, 60 years ago. And since industrial revolution, post-independence, there has been a lot of economic developments. And we have, with this development, we have westernized ourselves, but our genes haven't. So the genes have adapted itself in such a way that we were programmed to exist in less amount of food, but after birth we are exposed to excess amount of food, and hence our genes adapt to this, and this adaptation gets reflected in metabolic problems. And the metabolic spectrum can start in diabetes, polycystic ovary, hypertension, hyperuricemia, and you name it, the entire metabolic spectrum is all really responsible to the thrifty gene.
Yeah, so we have both thrifty phenotype and thrifty genotype. Gagan, my question is that even large babies, because macrosomic large babies, that happens because similarly insulin crosses the, insulin promotes because anabolic hormone, fetal growth. So why do malnourished babies, when they have catch-up growth, can develop obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease? Even big babies, macrosomic babies also have a high risk. So the weight has to be, birth weight has to
be optimal.
Yes.
And even the maternal weight gain has to be optimized based on maternal BMI. And we have to focus more on, balance of macronutrients and the supplementation of optimal micronutrients. So that brings me to Dr. Anita. Now we are, let's say, managing a woman with diabetes during pregnancy. What kind of obstetric or fetal monitoring would you want to consider, and at what levels?
Absolutely, very interesting interactions going on. And based on that, I'll say, first of all, the lifestyle management, I think, is prime for all of us also. The way she said, COVID cooking, we all are doing. And I think I have even grown my rooftop terrace now. I've got an artificial grass and I've got a swing also, so that I am, there only and I do my walking. I am not missing it. So I think lifestyle is really a great thing which has to be done. And regarding this management of the pregnancy during that monitoring, whenever patient comes, we have to have regular antenatal checkups. And initially for the mother, we must do all the routine investigations, which everybody knows. We do hemogram and we do her blood sugar and we are doing a urine routine examination and also thyroid, which you very clearly mentioned at the beginning. And then along with that, we must do her urine culture and 24 hours urinary protein and also fundoscopy. And in those cases who had pregnancy, this diabetes before pregnancy, we are also doing kidney function tests as well as HbA1c. So these should be done.
Yeah.
And regarding the fetal monitoring, we are doing a congenital, we were doing that level 2 scan at 18 to 20 weeks to rule out all the congenital abnormalities. And then thereafter, we are doing the biometry of the fetus as well as the amniotic fluid index at 28 weeks, 32 weeks, and 36 weeks. And also in case of, usually we don't find, but in case of fetal growth restriction, we are doing the Doppler studies also. That is to be done.
So I think we have a lot of advanced technology now to monitor fetal growth. So I think for a lay people, biometry would basically assess if the fetus is overgrowing or undergrowing as per gestational age.
Yes.
And the amniotic fluid we measure basically the liquor is less or more informed.
Water,
so that's
water in the water bag. Yeah. But the very important is the daily fetal movement count, which the mother herself can count, you know. So we teach her, and that is the main thing, and she knows the progress of the fetus, that fetal viability, we know through that. We always say count at least 12 movements in a, go, so that we are sure that your movements are there. And then also the non-stress test, which tells us again about the well-being of the fetus. So these are the few criteria which we do while monitoring the fetus as well as the mother during pregnancy.
Dr. Anita, we also get sometimes questions asked by patients to me. I mean, last week only one lady asked, one gynecologist has told me the delivery must happen after as soon as we finish 36, 37 weeks. Another is saying we go till term. So what is your opinion when it comes to diabetes? There are a lot of myths and misconceptions among people.
You are absolutely right. People are just scared and they have a lot of misconception and myths about it. Ideally, if a patient is
So I think meanwhile, again, I emphasize, Gagan, that I have this huge plan that now that we know online helps, Dr. Mukherjee will agree, we should address schools. That's the best thing we can do. We should address.
Absolutely. Class 7, 8 onwards.
Yes, 8. Yeah. And we have to address them, talk about nutrition, and you can do it online. We have videos, we could talk in vernacular, Hindi, Punjabi, whatever. And we have to talk to them about, health and preventive aspect of obesity. And second is we must be able to instill, even in the rural women. I wish television was used. I wish, Gagan, that they could say that do at least one sugar during pregnancy, and then of course repeat one at the end of 28 weeks. If the woman knows that, if we empower the woman, and when she's a student, class 8 or 10, it remains there that when she is pregnant, she needs to do one sugar at the time of when she's diagnosed, when she's pregnant, first visit, and then subsequently 28 weeks. So I think it's very important. And for India, it's universal screening and no other, So I think we should address schools or via newspapers or television. It's important because with GDM, we are actually, we are saving 2 generations. It's a transgenerational risk. I think Madam is back.
Yes. So I think Dr. Anita, we were discussing the question. Yeah. Yes. Madam. So, regarding the question about women worried about when the pregnancy should be timed, and also about whether these women require cesarean section or they can undergo a normal delivery.
Mostly they end up with normal delivery only in those cases where they have macrosomia, large baby, or there is some shoulder dystocia, or maybe some other emergency problems, fetal distress or some other problems not related to diabetes. In that case, cesarean is indicated, not otherwise, and mostly they end up having normal deliveries. So they all shouldn't be scared. Only thing is they have to be managed well, they have to be monitored well, they have to have regular antenatal checkups, and they have to be under of an obstetrician as well as an endocrinologist for the diabetes
But
management.
what about type 1s and type 2s becoming pregnant? Don't you think they should go for for an elective cesarean? The type 1 diabetics, it's a very precious pregnancy for a type 1 diabetes, and a type 2 diabetic becoming pregnant. You don't think that you like to go for an elective cesarean? No?
No, not at all. Only if required. As such, these days people are going for elective cesareans, even otherwise, for no reasons also, just for their own this thing. But it is not required.
But they advocate, I can't say about here, but when I got trained in UK as a specialist registrar, we used to have a placement in the gynecologist unit as well for looking after gestational diabetes. And they used to advocate a lot of normal deliveries in opposing a cesarean section.
Right.
And even home deliveries as well.
That's
Not home deliveries in India at least.
Yeah, not really.
That is
Not safe.
Obviously, their society is well supported, so they can have all these things.
yeah, NHS
Yes,
is
not in
different.
India. Yeah, not yet.
But Gagan, I think I would like my type 1 diabetic patient or my type 2 on insulin pump to go for an elective cesarean. I mean, that's my take.
Or maybe they can go to Dr. Anita, she being such a wonderful obstetrician.
Thank you so
So
much.
they'll
Yes,
get-
guys, we can. So,
Yeah, you said something I didn't
I think
hear.
one last question.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yes, Dr. Anita, she's coming. Okay, we'll take one last question. Dr. Sagrika, now let's say a woman has delivered. What happens to her insulin requirements in case she has a previous diabetes? And what about gestational diabetes? How would you follow up these patients?
Okay, I'll take gestational diabetes first. Gestational diabetes by definition starts during pregnancy, ends immediately after delivery. So that's strictly gestational diabetes. Immediately after delivery, what we see is that the insulin requirement completely falls to normal and the lady doesn't require any insulin at all. Nevertheless, during the post-operative or post-delivery, I shouldn't say operation, post-delivery period, we tend to monitor their blood sugar on a regular basis so that we are not missing any type 2s. Okay. What I tend to advise them is that if your blood sugar has been normal, when you come for follow-up after a month, do a fasting and PP. Blood sugar is normal. Get a blood sugar done again in 3 months. If it is normal, you don't have to come back to me. And then after that, try and do it around your birthday. And I insist this because you won't forget then. And gestational diabetes have got high tendency of turning into type 2 diabetes later on. So if you do a blood test around your birthdays, then definitely you're not going to miss the type 2 diabetes, or you are going to catch it quite early. So this is gestational. Say type 2 or type 1 diabetes after delivery, with whether it is type 1 or whether it is type 2, during pregnancy with the insulin resistance, with all the placental hormones, with immediately after delivery, your insulin resistance factor is taken care of, it falls down, and therefore your insulin requirement also comes down. If the mother is breastfeeding, which is again, I strongly advise, yes, you must breastfeed at least 6 months. If the mother is breastfeeding, continue with insulin until the baby stops breastfeeding. If breastfeeding is not there, if you are type 2, then you may start your previous medications for which you have been using for controlling diabetes. But again, your monitoring must be done very closely, because after delivery also you're going through a lot of stress, lot of emotional changes, dietary requirements. The baby takes preference on the mother. The mother was getting so much of care during the antenatal period, and now all the care has shifted to the baby. So the poor mother, no one really cares whether she's sleeping at night or whether she's keeping awake the entire day. No one cares for her. So the mother really has to care for all these things, and must keep in mind about the diabetes, that it's not messed about, because then chances of other problems, especially infection after delivery, can go up. If the mother has had a normal delivery, and then if she has an episiotomy, a wound infection is again a primary concern for that, if blood sugar remains uncontrolled. So monitoring must be there, and insulin requirement comes down, and if baby is not breastfeeding, then definitely they can start on medications.
What drugs can be given during feeding? Do you recommend giving oral anti-diabetic, or do you continue with insulin, and for how long?
Insulin, no run
Insulin,
diabetic
yes.
drug during breastfeeding at all, no risks at all. So until the baby stops breastfeeding, you continue on insulin and monitoring.
But
Yeah, there are
patients don't
some studies of
Yeah,
metformin that
metformin.
do show that it has very low transmission into the
milk.
milk. So that's something we can still consider, but I think for most women we'll require the insulin. So, Dr. Anita, any final words or piece of advice for our women out there before we wind up the session?
Sure. I think our women don't have to be scared. They have such great gems and jewels like you, Dr. Gagan Priya, Dr. Meena, Dr. Sagarika. So such great endocrinologists and being women themselves are there. And of course, obstetricians are there all over. So they have to be under a great supervision. They have to have their glycemic control, and all the risks, all the outcomes, they will be minimized. And the outcomes are going to be really great. So I think today's panel should really guide them. I hope they have got the right information, right education, right communication on this topic of gestational diabetes, and of course diabetes in pregnancy from people, great people like you. So they don't have to be scared. They have to go to the right people and follow the regime and follow their antenatal checkups and all the management part which their doctors are telling in a very, very strict manner, in a very stringent manner. And the outcomes are definitely going to be good for them.
Right. So I think that's wonderful. So Planned Parenthood, risk reduction, lifestyle modification, and a good communication with healthcare team, I think they go a long way. So I think we'll close the panel here. It's been an excellent discussion. So thank you everybody, Dr. Sagarika, Dr. Meena Chhabra, and Dr. Anita for joining me today. It's been really wonderful chatting with you all. And I hope our audience can learn a lot from our discussion. Thank you.
Gagan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.